Imagine this. You need to get a message 40 miles to a county seat. There's no email, there's no text, there's no phone, there's no pavement. You hitch a wagon or saddle a horse. You leave at dawn. If a wheel spoke breaks, a horse spooks in a storm, you might not make it. If you want to speak to your representative, that's the trip you make. That's the world our laws were written for. The speed of a horse, the fragility of wood and iron, risk in every mile. Most people alive today have never been forced to live at that tempo. But every major structure we live under now, our Congress, our regulatory system, our early energy laws, was designed for exactly that environment. 3 to 8 miles per hour travel on mud and rock, days to weeks for a letter to arrive, local decisions because local was all you could reach. And keep that picture in your head because everything that comes next won't make sense without it. So now zoom in on a farm or ranch in that area. People weren't just growing food, they were running small systems. They were running small integrated operations. They grew grain, they pressed seed oils, they used windmills, belt-driven machines to mill, saw, and pump water. Many knew how to distill alcohol for lamps, for limited use as solvent or fuel, not just for drinking. Leather work, wood work, basic iron work, often repaired all on site. Energy was not something that always arrived in a truck or pipeline. A lot of it was grown, pressed, distilled, or harnessed off of the property. That doesn't mean it was easy. It means independence wasn't a lifestyle brand. It was survival. It was day-to-day life. When your closest town is a half-day ride away and winter doesn't care about your schedule, autonomy isn't ideology, it's risk management. Now turn off the 20th century. Something important happened. Around the 20th century, something important happened. We didn't just invent engines. We invented engines that could keep farmers in control of their own fuel. Rudolf Diesel patented his compression ignition engine in 1890, or in the 1890s. In 1900, at the Paris Exposition, a diesel engine was demonstrated running on peanut oil, not as a stunt, proof of concept. Plant oils, usable fuel. Diesel's own writings talked about the potential of vegetable oils, especially for agricultural regions that might not have access to petroleum. The idea was simple. Let farmers grow what feeds the engine as well as what feeds the people. At roughly the same time, Henry Ford publicly supported ethanol, alcohol derived from crops, as a serious fuel candidate. Early internal combustion engines of that era could be run on alcohol blends with the appropriate setup. Ford is on record calling farm-based alcohol the fuel of the future and pointing out that almost anything that can ferment can become fuel. I believe the Model T actually had, or Ford developed, a carburetor that ran off of hybrid gasoline and farm-based alcohol, or alcohol blends. So by the early 1900s, we had engines that could run on plant oils, engines that could run on crop-based alcohol, a rural population already familiar with pressing oil and distilling alcohol. We had a plausible technical path where farmers grew food, farmers grew fuel, farmers powered their own equipment, and the path existed. It was real. It worked. What happened? Well, in 1901, a drilling operation near Beaumont, Texas, named Spindletop Oil Field, hit. The well didn't trickle, it roared. Spindletop was what was known as a gusher. It changed industrial history. Oil production from that one field flooded the market, and within a year or so, crude prices crashed to just a few cents a barrel. Imagine that. We're paying $3 to $4 at the pump in Texas. Cheap, abnormally cheap, cheap enough that refineries scaled, railroads and pipelines standardized around petroleum, gasoline and kerosene became the obvious, convenient, centralized choice, and that doesn't make plant oil or ethanol bad. It just makes them less competitive in a world where someone can pull effectively free energy out of the ground, at least for a while. This is the first turning of the wheel. Technically, possibility gives away to infrastructure lock-in. As I'm reading that, I don't like the way that sounds. Once you build pipelines, refineries, tanker fleets, and finance systems around petroleum, every other fuel starts the race with a weight around its neck. The second turning came from a place that on the surface had nothing to do with energy. The temperance movement. Throughout the late 1800s and early 1900s, groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League pushed to limit and or eliminate alcohol. They had moral, social, and public health motivations. They also had powerful backers. Industrialists, including John D. Rockefeller, provided significant financial support to temperance organizations. The documented donations run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars into that era, which would translate to millions of dollars today. Primary goal was not energy policy, but when Prohibition arrived in 1920, it didn't just outlaw drinking, it wrapped industrial alcohol into their web of regulation. Fuel alcohol had to be denatured, poisoned to prevent drinking. Production required federal permits and compliance inspections. Taxes and reporting requirements increased. Legal risks for missteps went way up. If you were a big industrial plant, you could navigate that. If you were a family farmer who might have previously distilled a few hundred gallons a year of fuel, you were done. On paper, industrial alcohol was still legal. In practice, small-scale fuel production became so burdened by regulation that it withered. So Ford's ethanol vision functionally dead, diesel's vegetable oil path outcompeted by cheap, centralized petroleum. Representation. While the energy system was centralized, something quieter happened in governance. Originally, U.S. representatives served districts of around 30,000 people. That's still large, but in a horse and wagon world, it's at least conceivable that a representative could know their region, travel it, and hear from a meaningful fraction of their people. Fast forward today, a member of Congress often represents 700,000 or more citizens. Meanwhile, anthropological research, especially work by Robin Dunbar, suggests humans can maintain about 150 stable social relationships before things start to blur. The number shows up in villages, military units, and effective organizations. So we have a structure where one person is supposed to understand and represent hundreds of thousands of lives, and that structure was designed for a world where horse speed limited what any one representative could know or cover, but we still pretend it works the same way in a world with 24/7 media and instant global communication. So the results should be very predictable or um, probable. Real people become statistics. Groups with consistent access, corporations, large donors, lobbies, special interests, they get the most of the attention, and rural and working communities, including farmers and ranchers, become a backdrop instead of co-authoring policy. The structure itself is miscaled. It's an old architecture carrying more weight than it was ever built to handle. So I come from a fifth generation ranching family. I'm in Texas. For part of my life, I raised my daughter on 3.3 acres carved out of a 333-acre exotic game ranch in the Texas Hill Country, and it was like Disneyland for adults. Because when you live close to the land, you can feel how different it would be if systems and rules were different. They live differently in small town rural America. Politics works differently in small town rural America. And I personally have always felt a connection to nature, to animals, to the ocean, to water, and a desire to be independent and have my own family ranch that I would pass on and pass down. Whereas what I see is that that's a American myth and pipe dream, as now developers have priced out family farms and family ranchers by taxation, and they lose their ranches that they fought generations for, that they went through blood and hardship, and due to simply because they can't cover the tax. When a property is paid off, why are we still paying taxes on it? So that brings me to a modern example that looks a lot like the path that we never took in 1900. In Wyoming, my friend Tyler Pertz runs a company called Range Sustain Tech. Winters there are brutal. Ranch work doesn't pause for winter. Tyler has a workshop that we call the Cyber Ranch, and the way he heats it says more about the future than most policymakers. Instead of conventional propane or even an electric resistance heater, Tyler uses two immersion-cooled Bitcoin miners. Two mining units run inside a tank of dielectric fluid. Fluid absorbs almost all of the electrical energy as heat. A hydronic loop pulls the hot fluid's energy and circulates it through the workshop via the HVAC system and through the radiant flooring. So the result is a warm, usable workspace in a harsh climate. At the same time, those miners are doing digital work, securing a network, producing Bitcoin, and whether you like or dislike Bitcoin, that's not the point. The point is it's a unique, underrated, underutilized infrastructure that we haven't begun to tap into all of the potential that it has, like Tyler has, capturing the waste heat. And this is something we've been working on for years now. And other products are in development and in the pipeline. The point is local control over hardware, local control over heat, local control over energy economics. Heat that would otherwise be wasted becomes an asset in building skin in the game and history on ranching and farming land. It's not a corporation deciding how he warms his shop. he is. It's not a distant utility, it's a rancher, engineer, using off the shelf parts and getting his hands dirty and modern knowledge to recover the autonomy that his great grandparents went on, struggled to have before all these paths cross. This is not about crypto or to romanticize the past. This is about architecture and incentives. We had a window over a century ago where engines were compatible with farm-grown fuels. Farmers were already used to producing and managing their own energy flows. Governance structures were close to human cognitive limits. Then cheap oil at Spindletop happens. Temperance movements and prohibition reshape alcohol law and prohibition. Banking and infrastructure reinforces petroleum, the petrodollar, centralized fuel, representation, scaling past what human beings can realistically track, and leaning heavily towards corruption, greed, and special interests. None of this required secret meetings in dark rooms. It required a series of decisions that each made sense in the moment for people and institutions making them. Rural and working communities lost control over energy and policy by those decisions being made in back rooms, though. What we're seeing now is things like farm and ranch solar, microgrids, battery-backed wells and barns, heat recovery from industrial processes and computing. What was technically possible in 1900, but never fully allowed to mature. And I'm not trying to sell you hardware. I'm not trying to tell you to buy miners or Bitcoin or solar panels. I'm sharing this because if you work in energy, agriculture, construction, government, some kind of systems engineering, or standing inside structures that were never really designed for this century, and you don't know how they're formed, it's very easy to blame. It's easy to place blame. But really, what in our world still runs on horseback rules? What's still shaped by assumptions from a time when travel was measured in days, not minutes, local production was a necessity, not a niche, and farmers and ranchers actually had a technical path to power their own lives. Because once you see those horseback rules and horsepower paradigm that we're still living in 2025, you can start deciding which ones you really want to live under. Do you want to live under a post-combustion operating system, or do we want to live under these legacy systems that are not designed to benefit the people that built this and sustained this country? Or the globe, or the planet for that matter. I keep talking a lot about America because I'm in America and because that's what I know and I've grown up. But these core ideas apply globally. I know that people want a home, they want independence, they want energy independence, and they want stability for their families. So this is something that is a universal truth of the future. I don't want to go long. So, good night.